The music was soft and elegant, drifting through the ballroom like a memory I couldn't quite hold on to. I stood just inside the entrance, smoothing the fabric of my dress, trying to steady my breathing. 3 hours. That's how long it took me to get ready. At 70, even small things demand patience. My fingers, stiff and slow, struggled with each tiny button on my pale lavender dress. I had saved for it over months, putting aside small amounts for my pension. It wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful. And today mattered. Today was my granddaughter's wedding. Lily, my only granddaughter. I hadn't seen her properly in almost a year. Still, when the invitation arrived, formal, cold, printed like a business notice, I held it in my hands as if it were something sacred. I told myself this was a chance, a beginning again. Smile. Ava, I whispered to my reflection that morning. You're still part of this family. Now, standing in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Crown Hotel, I wasn't so sure. Name. A voice cut through my thoughts. I stepped forward to the reception desk. The young woman behind it didn't look at me, her attention fixed on a glowing tablet. Ava Carter, I said. I'm the grandmother of the bride. I waited for recognition, for warmth. Nothing. Her fingers tapped quickly. Here. She slid a small badge across the counter. I smiled politely and picked it up. Then my breath caught. The words weren't printed. They were scribbled. The forgotten grandmother. For a moment, I thought I misunderstood. My vision blurred slightly, and I blinked hard. There must be some mistake, I said quietly. We're very busy, ma'am, she replied without looking up. Please proceed inside. That was it.
No επάλεγη. No correction.
Just dismissal. The badge felt heavier than it should have, like it carried years inside it. Years I had tried not to see too clearly. Across the room, I spotted Lily, radiant, laughing, surrounded by people who belonged there. Beside her stood my son, Daniel, tall and confident in his tailored suit. His hand rested casually on his wife Rebecca's back. Rebecca, always perfectly composed, always just slightly too polite. And next to Lily, her fiancé, Marcus. I had met him twice. He barely remembered my name. I slowly pinned the badge to my chest. If anyone noticed, they didn't show it. Of course they didn't. They hadn't noticed me in years. An usher guided me to my seat without a word. Back corner, partially hidden behind a towering arrangement of white roses. I sat down carefully, adjusting my dress, clutching my small purse. Inside it was a gift.
A check.
3 months of careful budgeting. Is this seat taken? I looked up. An older man stood beside me, kind eyes, slightly crooked smile. No, please, I said. Go ahead. Thank you, he nodded, sitting down.
I'm Richard.
Old colleague of the bride's father. Ava, I replied. I'm Lily's grandmother. He frowned slightly, glancing toward the front. And they seated you back here? I forced a smile. It's fine. But it wasn't. During the ceremony, I leaned slightly to see past the flowers. I caught glimpses. A profile, a hand, a veil. When they exchanged vows, I couldn't hear everything. Just fragments carried by the air. When everyone stood to applaud, I stood too. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not from joy. Something else. Something heavier. At the reception, things didn't improve. Table 23. Far from the center. The card read, additional guests. I sat with strangers. Polite, distant conversations filled the air. No one asked who I was. No one needed to. I watched as Daniel gave his speech. He spoke about Lily's childhood, her struggles, her growth. Stories I remembered vividly. Stories I had lived through. Moments where I had been there when no one else was.
He never mentioned me.
Not once. After dinner, I gathered my courage. I picked up the envelope and walked toward Lily. She saw me. For a second, our eyes met. She leaned toward Marcus and whispered something. They both turned away.
Laughed.
Engaged someone else. Still, I stepped closer. Lily, I said softly, you look beautiful. She turned, smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh,
Grandma.
you came.
Of course I came.
I wouldn't miss it, I said gently, holding out the envelope. You can leave that over there, she interrupted, pointing toward a table stacked with gifts.
No hug. No kiss. No pause.
Just redirecting me. She was already turning away. I placed my envelope among expensive boxes and glossy packages. That's when I saw it. A clipboard, left unattended on a nearby chair. I don't know why I looked. Maybe something inside me already knew. My eyes scanned quickly, then stopped. Ava Carter, limited contact. Seating isolated per family request. I froze. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not an accident. Not oversight.
Planned.
Deliberate. I had been placed there, kept at a distance. On purpose. I walked away slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Near the coat check, I found a quiet corner. And for the first time that evening, I stopped pretending. Memories came rushing in. Lily as a child, sitting at my kitchen table, drawing pictures while I baked cookies. Her small hand holding mine as we walked through the park. The nights she stayed with me when Daniel was too busy. I was there, always. I taught her to read. I encouraged her art. I was the one who noticed her talent. I was the one who believed in her. And now, I was the forgotten grandmother. Ma'am, are you all right? I turned. A man in a chauffeur's uniform stood nearby. Something about his face felt familiar. George, I said, surprised. His eyes lit up. Mrs. Carter, I thought it was you. I smiled faintly. It's been a long time. I used to drive for your neighbors years ago, he said. I work here now. He glanced at my badge. His expression darkened. That's not right. No, I said quietly. It isn't. He hesitated. Would you like me to take you home? I'm free for a while. I looked back at the ballroom. Laughter. Music. My family. Without me. They won't notice I'm gone, I said. And for the first time, I realized it was true. Outside, the night air felt cold but honest. As I settled into the car, something inside me shifted. Not broken. Not anymore. Something else. Something sharper. Before we pulled away, I asked quietly, George, do you know who's paying for this wedding? The city looked different at night from the back seat of a car. Or maybe it was just me who had changed. Streetlights slid across the window in long golden streaks, and for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about getting home quickly, or preparing for someone else's needs, or replaying conversations in my head trying to understand where I had gone wrong. I was simply sitting there, breathing, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside my chest. George drove in silence for a while, respectful, as if he understood that words would only get in the way. But eventually, he glanced at me through the mirror. You asked about the payment, he said carefully. The wedding, I mean. Yes, I replied, still looking out the window. Well, from what I heard, your son handled most of the arrangements. Deposits were made in advance, but the final balance is due tonight. Big number 2. How big? I asked. He hesitated just a second. Around 40,000. I nodded slowly. That didn't surprise me. Everything about the evening had screamed excess. Designer dresses, imported flowers, a string quartet, a venue far beyond what anyone truly needed. It wasn't a wedding.
It was a statement.
And like all statements in that family lately, it had nothing to do with me. They used credit? I asked. From what I understand, yes. Some of it, at least. I leaned back into the seat, letting that settle. A memory surfaced, Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Daniel and Rebecca whispering in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't hear. "We'll manage," Rebecca had said. "We always do. Besides, your mother helped enough already." Helped. That was a gentle way to describe it. I had sold my house for them. My home of 38 years. Every memory, every corner, every echo of my life gone. Converted into numbers on a bank statement that slowly disappeared into their plans. Education, investments, opportunities. That's what they told me. And I believed them. I always believed them. "George," I said suddenly, turning slightly toward him, "how well do you know the hotel management?" "Well enough," he answered. "I've been working with them for years." "If someone wanted to change something about the payment tonight," I said slowly, choosing each word, "who would they need to speak to?" He looked at me more directly now, his expression shifting from polite curiosity to something sharper. "You mean cancel it?" "I mean adjust it," I replied. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, he said, "I can introduce you to the night manager." I smiled faintly. That would be helpful. We didn't go home. Instead, George turned the car around and drove back toward the hotel, but not the grand entrance this time. We entered through a quieter side door, one meant for staff and logistics, not celebration. It felt appropriate. Less illusion. More truth. The night manager was a man in his 50s, composed, observant. His name was Mr. Collins. He looked at me with the kind of attention people reserve for situations they don't yet understand but know might matter. "How can I assist you, Mrs. Carter?" I said. "Ava Carter." George remained nearby, but silent. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the financial contributions to tonight's event," I continued. Mr. Collins folded his hands. "I see. Could you clarify?" I reached into my purse and removed my identification, placing it gently on the desk. "I am the grandmother of the bride," I said, "and I would like to formally withdraw any implied or assumed contribution associated with my name." He studied me for a moment, not dismissively, carefully. "Was there a specific arrangement indicating your financial involvement?" he asked. "There was an assumption," I replied. "One that I no longer wish to support." Another pause. Then he nodded slowly. "Understood. In that case, the remaining balance will remain the responsibility of the contracted parties." "Which are?" I asked, though I already knew. "The bride and her father." "Of course." I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not even satisfaction.
Clarity.
"Thank you," I said. Mr. Collins gave a slight, respectful nod. "If there's anything else, please let me know." There wasn't. Not anymore. The next morning, my phone started ringing before I even finished making tea. I didn't answer. I sat by the window, watching the early light creep across the buildings, listening to the quiet hum of the city waking up. For once, I let the phone ring, then stop, then ring again. Eventually, the answering machine picked up. "Ava, what did you do?" Daniel's voice came through, tight, controlled, but barely holding together. "The hotel is saying the payment structure was changed. They're demanding full settlement immediately. Call me back. Now." I sipped my tea. The second message came minutes later. Rebecca this time. "Ava, this is unacceptable. You've created a serious situation. We need to resolve this today." Unacceptable. That word lingered in the air. Not the name tag. Not the years of silence. Not the deliberate exclusion.
No.
This was unacceptable. By the third call, I already knew who it would be. Grandma, Lily's voice sounded different now. Softer, but strained. We might have to cancel the honeymoon. Marcus's parents are furious. What is going on? Why would you do this? I closed my eyes for a moment.
Why?
Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. I didn't call back. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. Instead, I sat in my small apartment, the one I had convinced myself was cozy, and looked around properly for the first time. The worn furniture, the faint stain on the ceiling, the narrow space that had become my entire world. I had traded a lifetime home for this.
For them.
And still it wasn't enough. On the fourth call, I finally picked up. Ava. Daniel's voice snapped instantly. Finally. You need to fix this. Today. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I asked quietly, Did you see my name tag? Silence. What? He said. At the wedding. I continued. Did you see what it said? Another pause. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not the point. It said, the forgotten grandmother. I said. Now the silence was different. Heavier. This must be some kind of mistake, he muttered. Was it also a mistake that I was seated behind a wall of flowers? I asked. Or that I was listed as limited contact? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. Because he knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. I adjusted something as well, I said calmly. What does that mean? He demanded. It means, I replied, that I finally matched my role to your expectations. Ava, this is ridiculous.
No, interrupta shuffly.
What's ridiculous is that I spent years pretending I still mattered in a room where I had already been erased. He exhaled sharply, frustration breaking through. We don't have that kind of money available right now. I almost smiled. I didn't have a house anymore, I said. That stopped him. Completely. After the call ended, I placed the phone down gently. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't waiting for approval. That evening, as the sun dipped below the buildings, I began doing something I hadn't done in years. I made a plan. Not for them. For me. And somewhere deep inside, something long buried finally rose to the surface. Not anger. Not revenge. Something stronger. Something quieter. Self-respect. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window and said, almost as a promise, I think I've been invisible long enough. The knock on my door came early. Too early for visitors, too deliberate to be accidental. I already knew who it was before I even stood up. There's a certain rhythm to urgency when it comes from people who are used to being obeyed. It doesn't hesitate, doesn't question, it demands. I opened the door. Daniel stood there, tense, already irritated, like the entire situation was something inconvenient he had to resolve between meetings. Rebecca stood beside him, arms crossed, her expression carefully controlled but unmistakably cold. Ava, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. Of course we did. I closed the door behind them slowly and gestured toward the small living room. You can sit, I said. They didn't. Daniel remained standing, pacing slightly, while Rebecca stayed near the doorway as if she didn't want to fully enter my space. We don't have time for this, he began. The hotel is threatening legal action. This is serious. I sat down in my chair, folding my hands calmly in my lap. Would you like some tea?
No, Rebecca snapped.
What we'd like is for you to undo whatever you did. I looked at her for a moment. Really looked at her. The perfect posture, the polished tone, the impatience hidden just beneath politeness. She had always been like this, never openly cruel, never obviously dismissive, but always distancing, always quietly removing me from the picture. I didn't do anything unusual, I said. I simply corrected an assumption. Daniel stopped pacing. What assumption? That I was part of the family in any meaningful way, I replied. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was uncomfortable, the kind that exposes things people would rather keep buried. This is not the time for emotional speeches, he said sharply. We are talking about $40,000. I sold my house for $180,000, I said. That landed
Hard.
Rebecca's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Daniel exhaled, annoyed. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, I answered, still calm. You told me it was for Lily's future. Her education. Her opportunities. It was, he insisted. Was it? I tilted my head slightly. Or was it also for a condo? He froze. Just for a moment. But I saw it. And that was enough. Rebecca stepped in quickly. We're not discussing finances right now. No, I said quietly. You never do. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. Mom, don't, I said softly. That stopped him more than shouting ever could have. I am not confused, I continued. I am not mistaken. And I am not going to pretend anymore. You're overreacting, Rebecca said, her tone tightening. It was a seating issue, a planning error. These things happen. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting, but I ignored the discomfort. Then I walked to the small table near the wall, picked up the badge, and placed it in front of him. Read it, I said. Daniel frowned, picking it up. His expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. That shouldn't have been there, he muttered. But it was, I replied. And so were the instructions. Rebecca looked at him sharply. A silent exchange passed between them. I saw it clearly now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. You embarrassed us, Daniel said suddenly, shifting tactics. Do you understand that? In front of everyone. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, Did you introduce me to anyone? He didn't answer. Did you mention me in your speech? Nothing. Did Lily speak to me for more than 10 seconds? Silence again. I was already invisible, I said. You're just upset that I stopped pretending I wasn't. Rebecca stepped forward now, her patience thinning. This isn't about feelings. This is about responsibility. I met her gaze. Exactly. Something in my voice must have shifted, because she hesitated. For years, I continued. I took responsibility. For you. For Daniel. For Lily. I gave everything I had because I believed it mattered. Because I believed I mattered. My voice didn't shake. That surprised even me. But you made it very clear, I said, that I don't. Daniel shook his head. That's not true. Then why was I labeled forgotten? I asked. No answer. Why was I placed in the corner? I continued. Nothing. Why did you forge access to my life in ways you thought I wouldn't notice? That one hit differently. Rebecca stiffened. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I held his gaze. I went to the bank this morning. That was all I needed to say. For a moment, everything stopped. His reaction was small, almost invisible, but it was there.
Fear.
Quickly hidden. You're imagining things, he said.
No. Iraplia.
I'm finally seeing them. Rebecca recovered faster. This is going nowhere, she said sharply. We need a solution. There is one, I answered. They both looked at me. You pay what you agreed to pay. Daniel stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. We can't do that right now, he said. The business is not my responsibility. I finished for him. That's not how family works, Rebecca snapped. I almost smiled again. Exactly, I said. The room fell quiet. A different kind of quiet this time. Not tension. Not confusion. Finality. Daniel's voice softened slightly, shifting again. Mom, we'll fix things. We'll make it right. But you have to help us here. I studied him. My son. The boy I raised alone after his father died. The teenager I worked 2 jobs for. The man I had defended, supported, believed in. And suddenly I saw him clearly. Not as my child. As a stranger. You had years to make it right, I said.
Hebeg.
This is pointless, she muttered. Daniel lingered a second longer. This isn't over, he said quietly. I nodded. No, I agreed. It isn't. After they left, I didn't move right away. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the silence they left behind. My hands were trembling now. Not from fear.
From release.
I sat down slowly, pressing my palms against my knees. For years, I had avoided this moment, this confrontation, this truth, because I thought losing them would break me. But sitting there, in that small apartment, something unexpected settled over me. I wasn't broken. I was a lighter. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. People moved below, busy, unaware, living their own lives. And, for the first time in decades, so would I. Later that evening, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a small stack of old photographs.
Lily as a child.
Daniel as a boy. A life that once felt full. I closed the drawer gently. That chapter was over. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think something I had never truly admitted before. Maybe family isn't who you give everything to. Maybe it's who actually sees you. I turned off the lights, sat down in the quiet, and whispered to myself, this should have happened years ago. The next morning felt unfamiliar in the quietest way possible. No calls I felt obligated to answer, no plans built around someone else's expectations, no invisible pressure pressing down on every decision. Just silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty, but open. I stood in my kitchen longer than usual, holding a cup of coffee, watching the light shift across the wall, and realized something simple and unsettling. I had no idea what to do with my day. For most of my life, that would have terrified me. Now, it felt like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. The phone buzzed again on the table. Daniel. Then Rebecca. Then Lily. One after another, like clockwork. I turned the screen face down. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. For the first time, I understood that answering them immediately wasn't responsibility, it was habit. And habits, I was beginning to see, can look a lot like chains when you've worn them long enough. Instead, I walked to the bedroom and opened my closet. It wasn't large. It didn't hold much. A few dresses, a coat, practical shoes. The remains of a life that had slowly shrunk over the years without me fully noticing. I pulled out a small suitcase and set it on the bed. For a moment, I just looked at it. It felt symbolic. Not dramatic, not rebellious, just necessary. I started packing slowly. A few clothes. My documents. The things that were mine, not given, not borrowed, not tied to anyone else's expectations. When I reached the bottom drawer, my hand paused. Inside was an old sketchbook. I hadn't opened it in years. Carefully, I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed. The pages were filled with watercolors. Soft landscapes, quiet streets, sunlight on windows, small details most people wouldn't notice. I remembered exactly when I painted them. After my husband died. During that time when grief was too heavy to carry with words, and I needed something else to hold it. Painting had been that space. That escape. That quiet place where I could still feel like myself. Somewhere along the way, I stopped. Not because I lost the ability. Because I lost the permission. I closed the sketchbook gently and placed it in the suitcase. That was coming with me. By noon, the apartment looked exactly the same, except I didn't belong to it anymore. I took one last look around. Not with sadness. Not even with nostalgia. Just acknowledgement. This had been a stop, not a home. A place I ended up in, not one I chose. I picked up my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out. The train station was busier than I expected. People rushing, dragging luggage, checking tickets, living inside their own timelines. I stood still for a moment, absorbing it. No one here knew me. No one expected anything from me. It was strangely freeing. I bought a ticket without overthinking it. One way. That detail mattered more than anything else. The train ride was long, but I didn't mind. I watched the city slowly dissolve into smaller towns, then into open spaces, then into stretches of land that felt untouched by urgency. The rhythm of the train was steady, grounding. For once, I wasn't rushing toward something I didn't want or away from something I couldn't face. I was just moving. When I arrived, the air felt different.
Cleaner.
Sharper. Alive in a way the city hadn't been in years. And there she was, Clara, standing near the platform, waving, her smile wide and genuine, the same as it had always been. Time had added lines to her face, silver to her hair, but it hadn't taken anything away from who she was. Ava, she called, pulling me into a tight embrace before I could even say a word. I laughed softly, surprised by how natural it felt. It's been too long. Too long, she agreed, holding my shoulders and looking at me carefully. You're thinner. And tired. Not tired, I said after a second. Just done. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Good, she said. Then you're right on time. Her house sat near the water, simple but full of life. The kind of place that didn't try to impress anyone but felt welcoming the moment you stepped inside. Large windows, soft light, the quiet sound of waves in the distance. This is beautiful, I said, setting my bag down. It's peaceful, she corrected with a small smile.
You'll get used to that.
We sat in the kitchen with tea, just like we used to years ago. No rush, no pressure to fill every silence. I told her everything, not in fragments, not softened, not filtered. The wedding, the name tag, the confrontation, the bank, all of it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix anything. She just listened. And when I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. You stayed too long, she said gently. I nodded. I know. That evening, we sat outside watching the sky shift into soft shades of gold and blue. The water reflected everything, calm and endless. I've been thinking, Clara said. There's a small art center nearby. They run classes, mostly for beginners. They've been looking for someone to help out.
Ich glänzte her.
I haven't painted in years. So, she shrugged, that doesn't mean you stopped being someone who can. I didn't answer right away, because part of me still wasn't sure I was allowed to want something like that. The next day, I went with her. The art center was simple, bright, open, filled with natural light. Easels stood near the windows, brushes soaking in jars, unfinished paintings scattered across tables. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't impressive. It was real. A woman named Irene showed me around. Practical, direct, the kind of person who valued honesty over politeness. Do you paint? She asked. Yes, I said. Do you like teaching? I've never tried. She nodded. Do you care about it? I thought about Lily as a child, about small hands holding a brush, about explaining color, light, patience. Yes, I said. Then you'll be fine, she replied. Just like that. No doubt.
No hesitation.
That afternoon, my phone rang again. Lily. I stepped outside to answer. Grandma, where are you? She asked immediately. I looked out at the water, at the quiet horizon stretching endlessly. I'm somewhere I chose, I said. That doesn't make sense, she replied. You just left.
No, I correcte gently.
I finally stopped staying. There was a pause. Then, Dad says you're not thinking clearly. I smiled slightly. For the first time in years, I said, I am. When I ended the call, I didn't feel guilt. That surprised me. What I felt instead was something far more unfamiliar.
Peace.
That night, back at Clara's house, I unpacked my suitcase. At the bottom, I found the sketchbook again. I opened it, ran my fingers over the pages. Then I picked up a pencil. My hand hesitated at first, then moved.
Slowly, carefully.
Like remembering a language I hadn't spoken in years. And somewhere between the first line and the second, I realized something. I wasn't starting over. I was returning to who I had always been. I looked out at the dark ocean, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves, and whispered quietly, "This is my life now." Autumn arrived slowly, like a quiet promise being kept. The air turned crisp, the morning softer, the light stretching differently across the water. Time moved here, but not the way it used to. It didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't pull me in 100 directions at once. It simply existed. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I existed with it, not against it. 3 months passed. Not quickly, not slowly, just fully. My days found a rhythm I didn't have to fight. Mornings with tea by the window, watching the ocean shift colors with the sky. Afternoons at the art center, surrounded by people who didn't know my past and didn't expect anything from me except honesty. Evenings with Clara, sharing stories, laughter, and comfortable silences that didn't need to be filled. I started teaching. At first, I thought I would feel uncertain, exposed, like someone pretending to be something she wasn't. But the moment I stood in front of that small group, retirees, visitors, people who had never held a brush before, I realized something simple. I knew how to do this. Not because I was perfect, not because I was trained, but because I understood what it meant to begin again. Don't try to paint what you see, I told them one afternoon. Paint what you notice. They looked confused at first, then curious. Then something shifted, and I recognized that feeling. It was the same one I had once seen in Lily. Before everything changed. My phone rang less often now. At first, there were dozens of missed calls. Messages layered with frustration, urgency, manipulation, even guilt. Daniel's voice demanding, Rebecca's voice controlled but sharp, Lily's voice emotional but always circling back to the same thing. When are you coming back? I stopped answering. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. Some conversations don't change anything. They only repeat what has already been proven. Eventually, the calls slowed. Then became occasional. Then rare. And with each passing week, something inside me grew stronger. Not louder. Just steadier. One morning in late October, Clara walked into the kitchen holding a newspaper. "You should see this," she said, placing it in front of me. I glanced down and froze. There, in the real estate section, was a photograph I recognized instantly. My parents' cottage.
Small.
Weathered. Overlooking the ocean. A place filled with childhood summers, quiet mornings, laughter that once felt permanent. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Below the image, the listing read, "Charming coastal property. Prime development opportunity." And beneath that, Daniel's company name. I felt the world narrow into something sharp and cold. "This isn't possible," I said quietly. "It's in my name." Clara didn't say anything.
She didn't need to.
I already knew. The call to the county office confirmed it. The property had been transferred. 3 weeks ago.
Signed.
Approved. processed. My signature. Forged. This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait. I didn't try to understand or excuse or soften it. I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia.
Direct.
Focused. Unimpressed by excuses. After reviewing everything, she looked at me and said, "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is fraud." Hearing it said that clearly did something to me. It removed the last layer of doubt, the last instinct to protect. "We can reverse it," she continued, "but we need to act immediately." I nodded, not because I was certain, but because I was done being uncertain. That night, I sat outside again, the ocean darker now, the wind colder. Clara joined me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Are you going through with it?" she asked. "Yes," I said.
No hesitation.
No fear, just truth. The next day, the letter was sent. Formal.
Clear.
Final. Return the property, or face legal consequences. The response came faster than I expected.
Calls.
Messages. Pressure. This time, not just from Daniel and Rebecca. From Marcus. From people who suddenly cared very much about family reputation. I answered one call. Just one. "Ava." Marcus's voice came through, controlled but tense. "This has gone too far." "No," I said calmly. "This is where it finally stopped." "You're creating a scandal," he said. "This could affect everyone." "Everyone," I repeated. "Or just you." A pause. Then, the property wasn't being used. It made sense to develop it.
"It wasn't yours," I said.
Another pause. "You're overreacting."
No. Y replied quietly.
I underreacted for years. 3 days later, the listing disappeared. A week later, the property was legally returned to my name.
Just like that.
Because they knew this time I wouldn't step back. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt clear. That illusion I had carried for so long, that one day they would see me, value me, treat me like I mattered, it was gone. And strangely, that felt like freedom. A few days later, I made one final call. Lily answered. "Grandma?" she said, cautious now. "Yes," I replied. "Are you coming back?" she asked. The question was softer this time, less demanding, more uncertain. I closed my eyes for a moment, then answered honestly.
No.
Silence. Then, so that's it? I looked out at the ocean, at the life I had built piece by piece without even realizing it. "No," I said gently. "That's the truth." I told her about the will, about the decision, the cottage, my savings, everything, going to the art center, to people who would use it, value it, grow from it. "You're choosing them over us?" she asked. I almost smiled. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." After the call ended, I walked down to the shore. The wind was strong, the waves louder than usual, crashing against the rocks with steady force. I stood there for a long time, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just present. For 70 years, I had given everything I had to people who treated me like I was temporary, optional, replaceable. And now, for the first time, I understood something simple and undeniable. I was none of those things. I turned back toward the house, toward the light in the windows, toward a life that was finally mine. And I smiled. Not the polite smile I had worn for years. Not the careful one meant to make others comfortable. A real one. Quiet.
Certain. Free.
And as I stepped inside, I said out loud, just to hear it, just to believe it fully. I was never forgotten. I was just in the wrong place.